Imagine a life where fear no longer controls your choices, where you face challenges with calm clarity and unshakable confidence. What if I told you the only thing between you and freedom is your own mind? Most people never choose themselves because fear convinces them they're not enough. But Zen reveals, to find your inner self, you must first respect yourself, know your self-worth, and always choose yourself, even when it feels uncertain. As one ancient teaching says, fear is a lie told by the ego to protect what doesn't exist. Before we begin, subscribe to Deep Wisdom, where every video is a doorway to calm, clarity, and timeless Buddhist insight you won't find anywhere else. Stay until the end. There's a powerful bonus lesson most people never hear, one that could change how you find yourself forever. 1. Fear exists only in thought. Fear exists only in thought. It is never truly here, in this breath, in this moment. It lives like a ghost inside your imagination, whispering of things that might go wrong, moments that haven't yet happened, and stories that may never come true. But if you pause and take one conscious breath, you will notice something quietly miraculous. Fear begins to fade. It was never solid, only a shape your mind painted across the walls of the present. The mind creates its own storms. The heart always knew the sky was clear. When you look deeper, you realize fear is not an enemy, but a projection. It is the shadow cast by your mind's flashlight when it turns away from the light of presence. The more you chase the shadow, the darker the room becomes. The moment you turn the light back toward awareness, the shadow disappears. Close your eyes for a moment and breathe. Feel this breath moving in and out. Listen carefully, not to your thoughts, but to the silence beneath them. Each time you breathe fully, fear softens. Each time you come back to the body, to the rhythm of life itself, fear loses its ground. It cannot survive where the mind is still and the heart is awake. The Buddha once said that fear is a form of ignorance, not of knowledge, but of presence. When you live inside your thoughts, you live inside imagined danger. But when you return to awareness, there is no danger here. Just life unfolding. Just the sound of your breath. Just this moment, enough, complete, whole. Ask yourself gently, what would life feel like without the story you attach to fear? Could you walk through your day without that constant whisper of, what if? Can fear exist in a completely silent mind? Try it. Sit in silence and look for fear. You won't find it anywhere except in thought. The less you fear, the more you live. Because life expands only in the absence of resistance. The mind says, be careful, but the heart says, be here. When you stop fearing life, life stops fearing you. It opens like a lotus in the morning light, effortlessly, naturally. So remember this, fear was never real, only remembered. Peace was never lost, only overlooked. And when you stop chasing the shadow, you see that the sky was never stormy. It was your mind that thundered. Now breathe again and see, the storm was never real. The sky was always clear. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not sure what to say, just type, my fear ends today. 2. The mirage of control. What if control is just another disguise for fear? We hold so tightly to plans, people, and outcomes, believing that if we manage every detail, life will finally feel safe. But the truth is, control is a mirage. The more you chase it, the more it fades into the distance. Beneath it all lies fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of not being enough. Yet, life was never meant to be caged. It was meant to be lived. The tighter you grip the sand, the faster it slips away. Think about that. The more you try to force things to stay the same, the more restless and anxious you become. Like a person trying to hold water in their hands. The harder they clench, the faster it escapes. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, not because life is cruel, but because life is movement. It flows. To fight it is to suffer. To trust it is to be free. Trying to control life is like trying to cage the wind. You end up exhausted and empty-handed. And yet, the mind still insists, if I just plan better, if I just predict more, I'll be safe. But have you noticed? Even in your most carefully managed days, surprises still come. Discomfort still arises. The world still turns on its own accord. Maybe control was never safety. Maybe it was just distraction. Picture yourself floating in a river. Feel the water moving beneath you. For a moment, stop paddling. Don't resist. Notice how, even when you do nothing, the river still carries you forward. That is the nature of life. It moves whether you struggle or surrender. And the one who learns to trust the current lives with peace. What part of life are you most afraid to release? The relationship that must flow on, the plan that must change, the image of who you thought you'd be. Does control bring you peace or just temporary relief before the next wave of worry? What would surrender look like in your daily life? The less you fear, the more you live, because surrender is not giving up, it's waking up. It's seeing that life does not need your control, only your participation. The river doesn't need your permission to reach the ocean. It was always destined to. So, let go of the struggle. Trust the flow. When you stop fighting the current, you finally feel the peace that was carrying you all along. 3. Resistance is fear in disguise. Why do we suffer more from resistance than from reality itself? Because what we resist grows stronger. The moment you say, I don't want this, you give it life. You feed it with your attention, your energy, your fear. Reality is neutral, it simply is. But resistance turns it into pain, like a small wave that becomes a storm only because we fight the tide. The more you resist, the more you feed what you fear. You may notice this in your own life. The harder you try not to feel anxious, the more anxious you become. The more you reject uncertainty, the heavier it feels. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from what happens, but from our reaction to it. It is not life that hurts us, it is our refusal to accept life as it is. Fear is like quicksand, struggle and you sink, be still and you float. Imagine standing knee-deep in that quicksand. The instinct is to thrash, to fight, to escape. But the more you struggle, the deeper you go. The only way to survive is to be still, to trust that stillness is stronger than panic. So too with fear. When it appears, don't battle it. Sit with it. Watch it breathe. Let it exist without resistance, and soon it dissolves into the silence from which it came. The next time fear arises, don't move. Close your eyes and notice where it lives in your body. Don't call it bad, don't call it wrong, simply watch. Watch it breathe, watch it pulse, and notice how, like a passing cloud, it changes shape and drifts away. You don't need to conquer fear. You only need to stop arguing with it. What are you fighting that only needs witnessing? How often does fear grow simply because you refuse to look at it gently? What if peace means not needing to win, not needing to fix, but simply allowing yourself to be here, completely present, completely alive? The less you resist, the more you live. Because freedom is not found in control or avoidance. It's found in acceptance. Resistance builds walls. Surrender opens doors. When you stop fighting the moment, life flows through you with ease. And when you stop fearing fear itself, you find the quiet truth that was always waiting beneath it. Peace is not the reward for victory. It is the absence of struggle. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not sure what to say, just type, "My fear ends today." 4. The fear of being seen. Are you living freely or performing safety? So much of our suffering comes not from what others think, but from what we think they think. We build an identity, brick by brick, shaped by opinions, expectations, and silent fears. We wear masks to be accepted and slowly forget the face beneath them. Yet every mask we wear is heavy. It presses on the spirit, suffocating the truth that longs to breathe. When you drop the mask, the soul can finally breathe. But dropping it takes courage. The courage to be misunderstood. The courage to be real. The Buddha often reminded his followers that freedom is found not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. To live awake is to live without pretending, to stop chasing approval and start embodying truth. The fear of being seen is the fear of losing control over your image, but that image was never real. It was only a reflection dancing on the surface of your mind. The ego builds a mask from others' opinions, then forgets its own face. It keeps asking, "Am I good enough? Do they approve? Will they stay?" But the self that seeks approval can never rest, because it depends on the changing winds of the world, and the world never stops changing. The more you chase approval, the further you drift from peace. True freedom is found when you no longer perform your existence. Imagine standing alone on a quiet mountain. No one to judge, no one to please. The wind moves gently through the trees, and the silence feels infinite. Who are you then? Without the roles, the titles, the followers, the masks, who remains? That presence, that stillness, that awareness, that is you. And in that space, fear cannot survive, because there is nothing left to protect. What image do you fear losing most? Whose approval costs you your peace? Who would you be if you stopped pretending? These are not questions to answer with your mind, but with your silence. Sit with them until they echo softly into your heart. The less you fear being seen, the more you live as you are. Because truth does not need to perform, it simply shines. When you remove the masks, you realize that acceptance was never something to earn. It was the essence of your being all along. And when the soul breathes freely, life finally breathes through you. 5. Impermanence is freedom. What if letting go is not loss, but liberation? We spend so much of life clinging to what must eventually pass. People, moments, successes, even the identities we've built. We fear change because it reminds us that nothing stays. But what if that truth is not a punishment, but a blessing? What if impermanence is not something to fear, but something that quietly frees us? Everything that changes is teaching you how to stay. The Buddha spoke of impermanence not to frighten us, but to awaken us, to remind us that peace lies not in holding on, but in knowing how to let go. Every ending is a teacher. Every falling leaf, a whisper that says, this too is part of life. When we stop resisting change, we discover a peace that no circumstance can take away. Life is a river. Fear begins when you try to freeze the water. The river does not cling to its past shape, nor mourn the bend it just crossed. It keeps flowing, guided by its own nature. We suffer because we try to make the river still, to preserve a moment, a feeling, a person. But when we freeze the water, it loses its life. To live is to flow, to trust the current, to move as life moves. Feel everything in your life, your breath, your heartbeat, the air brushing against your skin, all of it constantly moving, changing, alive. Even your thoughts are rivers, rising and fading in the vast ocean of awareness. The fear of impermanence is only the fear of misunderstanding it. Nothing real is ever lost. It simply transforms. The body changes, the seasons pass, but awareness remains. What are you afraid to lose that was never truly yours? Could change itself be your teacher, reminding you that peace is found not in possession, but in presence? What if impermanence was not the enemy, but the key that unlocks the beauty of every fleeting moment? The less you fear change, the more you live fully. Because when you realize that nothing lasts, every moment becomes sacred. You stop waiting for perfection and start seeing perfection in what is. You hold life gently, with open hands, knowing that what leaves was never meant to stay, and what remains was never meant to leave. Impermanence is not the end of peace, it is the beginning of freedom. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not sure what to say, just type, "My fear ends today." 6. Fear ends where awareness begins. Can fear survive the light of awareness? Fear thrives in the dark corners of the mind, where attention is scattered and the heart is asleep. It whispers in half-truths, feeds on assumptions, and grows strong in the absence of presence. But the moment you turn your gaze inward and see it clearly, it begins to dissolve, like mist touched by morning sunlight. Awareness is not a weapon against fear. It is the light that reveals there was never an enemy at all. To see clearly is to end the illusion of danger. Most of what we fear never truly happens. It only happens in thought. The mind creates stories of threat, of rejection, of loss, and then forgets that it was the author all along. When you return to awareness, you remember the truth. Right here, right now, you are safe. The body breathes, the heart beats, and life continues, quietly, peacefully, perfectly. Fear is a ghost that vanishes the moment the lamp of mindfulness is lit. Imagine sitting in a dark room, feeling haunted by shadows. They seem real until you strike a match. The light doesn't argue with the darkness, it simply reveals. So it is with fear. You don't need to fight it or suppress it. You only need to look at it directly, gently, without judgment. In that seeing, fear loses its power. Visualize a candle flame inside your chest, soft and steady. Each breath feeds its glow, each fear dimming away in its warmth. That light is your awareness. It doesn't push fear out, it transforms it. It turns panic into understanding, resistance into acceptance, and chaos into calm. Awareness doesn't remove life's challenges, it removes the illusion that you are separate from them. What happens when you simply watch your fear instead of believing it? Can awareness and fear truly coexist? What does clarity feel like in your body? Soft, spacious, grounded? The next time fear arises, don't run. Stay, watch, breathe. Notice how it changes when you no longer call it mine. The less you fear, the more you live, because awareness brings you home to the present, where fear cannot follow. In awareness, there is no future to dread, no past to regret, only this sacred moment of aliveness. Fear ends not by force, but by seeing. And when the candle of mindfulness burns bright within you, every shadow of fear bows to its light. 7. The mind that trusts lives lightly. What if trust, not control, is the true strength? We spend so much energy trying to predict the future, to secure outcomes, to make life obey our plans. Yet the more we tighten our grip, the heavier we become. Control promises safety, but delivers anxiety. Trust, on the other hand, feels uncertain, but it's where freedom begins. The mind that trusts lives lightly. It moves through life not with fear, but with faith in the unfolding of each moment. The leaf does not question the wind. It moves and remains free. It doesn't ask, "Where will I land?" or "What if I fall?" It simply dances because it trusts the air that carries it. That is the wisdom of trust. A quiet confidence that even if the direction changes, you will still be guided. Fear says, "I must know." Trust says, "I am held." A bird doesn't cling to the branch, it trusts its wings. Imagine that bird sitting high above the world. It does not panic when the wind blows or the branch sways. It knows that its true safety isn't in holding on, it's in remembering that it can fly. So too with you. Your safety is not in your circumstances, but in your awareness. When you trust yourself, trust life, and trust the unfolding path, you begin to fly beyond fear. Visualize yourself walking through life lightly. Each step appears just as you take it. You don't see the whole road ahead, but you don't need to. You breathe, you step, you trust. Notice how much easier life feels when you stop demanding guarantees and start welcoming surprises. The mind may crave certainty, but the soul thrives in surrender. Do you trust life as much as you try to predict it? What if trust didn't mean safety, but peace? Can you feel the difference between holding on and being held? When you relax into life instead of wrestling with it, even uncertainty becomes soft, almost sacred. The less you fear, the more you live, because trust dissolves fear's foundation. A trusting heart does not need to control everything. It simply participates with grace. When you trust the process, life feels lighter. You stop bracing for the fall and start feeling the wind beneath you. And one day, you realize you were never falling at all. You were always being carried. 8. The fear of failure is the fear of beginning. How many dreams died because you waited to be unafraid? Fear tells you to wait for the right time, for certainty, for confidence, but none of these ever truly arrive. The mind says, "I'll begin when I'm ready." Yet readiness is born only in action. The truth is simple and humbling. The fear of failure is really the fear of beginning. We wait for the water to calm before stepping in, not realizing that calm only comes once we start to swim. Fear whispers you might fall. Courage whispers, "So what?" The Buddha taught that the mind creates fear to protect its comfort, not your growth. It builds walls around your potential and calls it safety. But the one who lives within those walls never knows the sky. Growth requires movement into uncertainty. It means walking through the trembling, not waiting for it to pass. The seed never knows if it will bloom, yet it breaks itself open anyway. That breaking is its faith. It doesn't ask if the soil will be kind or if the rain will come. It just opens, because that is its nature. You too were meant to open, to risk, to begin again and again. Failure is not your enemy. Stagnation is. Failure teaches what comfort never can. It humbles the ego, strengthens the spirit, and softens the heart. Picture your fear as a door, not a wall. It looks solid from a distance, but the closer you step, the more you see the handle, the hinges, the way forward. Every step you take toward that door makes it smaller. Every breath taken in awareness is an act of quiet courage. When you push gently on fear, you realize it was never locked. It only needed you to try. What have you delayed because of fear? What would you do if fear was not part of the decision? Can failure be seen not as defeat, but as part of awakening? Every so-called failure carves you deeper, making more room for wisdom to grow. The less you fear, the more you live, because life begins again the moment you dare to. Every breath, every sunrise, every small step forward says the same thing. Begin. Do not wait for certainty. Begin trembling. Begin unsure. Begin anyway. The courage to start is the bridge between fear and freedom, and every time you cross it, life opens a little wider. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not sure what to say, just type, "My fear ends today." 9. Fear of rejection is attachment to validation. Why do we fear rejection more than losing ourselves? Somewhere along the path, we began to believe that worth is measured by how others see us. We learned to perform for love, to please for peace, to shrink our truth for belonging. And so, we began to live half alive, accepted by the world, but estranged from our own hearts. The fear of rejection is not really fear of others. It is fear of being without validation. Yet, the soul never needed an audience to shine. You cannot be rejected for being what you truly are. Rejection can only touch the masks you wear, never the truth beneath them. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and the craving for validation is one of the subtlest attachments of all. It keeps you bound to the fragile approval of others, like a leaf blown by every wind of opinion. Freedom begins the moment you stop seeking to be liked and start allowing yourself to be real. Like a mirror waiting for approval from its reflection, we forget we were always enough. You are not what people think of you. You are the awareness that witnesses all thoughts, all judgments, all passing faces. When you chase validation, you build your house on sand. But when you rest in authenticity, you stand on the ground of truth, unshaken, even when others turn away. See yourself surrounded by silence, no applause, no judgment, and still feel whole. Imagine walking through a quiet forest with no one to impress, no eyes upon you, no standards to meet. You breathe, you walk, you exist, and in that simplicity, you feel peace. This is who you are without the noise, whole, steady, complete. Who are you when no one approves of you? How much peace have you traded for acceptance? What if being authentic is the highest success? When you stop fearing rejection, you rediscover your natural state, freedom. Because the truth is, you were never rejected. You were only being redirected back to yourself. The less you fear, the more you live. And the less you seek validation, the more love flows through you, not as approval from the world, but as presence within your own heart. When you no longer need to be chosen, you realize you were never separate, never unworthy. You were always enough. And in that realization, every fear of rejection quietly disappears into peace. 10. The silence that dissolves fear. What if the cure for fear was not courage, but stillness? We are taught to fight fear, to confront it, outthink it, or conquer it. Yet every battle strengthens what we resist. Fear feeds on noise, the noise of thought, of striving, of endless doing. But when you become still, fear has nowhere to hide. Stillness is not weakness, it is presence. It is the moment when the storm inside you stops needing to prove its strength. Silence is not empty, it is full of knowing. The Buddha often retreated into silence, not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. In silence, you realize that fear was never as big as it seemed. It was only amplified by the echo of your restless mind. When you stop filling the space with words, with plans, with self-doubt, truth begins to whisper. and that whisper is peace. The ocean is vast because it remains still beneath the waves. At the surface, waves crash, winds roar, and movement never ends. But deep below, there is no disturbance, only stillness, silent and immense. That is the nature of your awareness. The surface mind trembles with fear, but beneath it lies a depth untouched by any storm. When you rest there, fear loses its meaning. Sit quietly for a minute. Listen to the space between sounds, the pauses between breaths, the soft hum of existence that never ceases. That space is not emptiness, it is presence itself. That is where fear cannot exist, because fear belongs to time, to the mind that imagines what could go wrong. But silence belongs to eternity. It is always here, always now. How often do you listen to silence? What truths appear when the noise fades? Could silence be your greatest teacher? When you begin to value stillness as much as progress, clarity replaces confusion. You stop needing to solve everything and instead begin to understand everything. The less you fear, the more you live, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop being divided within yourself. Silence brings all parts of you together, body, breath, thought, and soul, into a single, peaceful awareness. In that harmony, fear dissolves naturally, like mist before the morning sun. You don't defeat fear, you outgrow it. And when you learn to listen deeply, you discover that silence has been guiding you all along. 11. The freedom of inner non-attachment. What if you could walk through fear untouched? Imagine not the absence of challenge, but the absence of attachment to outcomes, opinions, and identities that keep you bound. Most of what we call fear is not about the moment itself. It is about losing what we think we are. We tremble not because of life's uncertainty, but because we have tied our worth to what changes. True freedom begins the moment you stop clinging. Freedom is not having nothing, it's needing nothing. When you are free within, the world may change 1,000 times and you remain unshaken. You no longer chase control or resist loss. The heart becomes spacious, like an open sky that allows clouds to pass. Nothing is rejected, yet nothing is held. This is the essence of Zen non-attachment. Not cold indifference, but warm acceptance. The lotus rises from muddy water untouched because it never clings. It does not fight the mud, nor wish for cleaner water. It simply grows. Its purity is not because it avoids the dirt, but because it remains untouched by it. You too can rise in the same way. Fear will visit, doubt will whisper, uncertainty will surround you, but none of it must define you. When you stop identifying with fear, it loses its roots in you. Imagine your fears as raindrops sliding off lotus petals. None can stay. Feel that lightness, that sacred detachment. You do not need to deny the rain. You only need to stop trying to hold it. Watch your emotions move like weather across the sky of your mind. Joy, fear, sadness, they come, they go. What remains unchanged is your awareness, the calm witness behind every storm. What emotions do you still cling to for identity? Can you observe fear without becoming it? What would inner freedom feel like to you? Sit quietly with these questions and notice how each answer arises and dissolves. That is the movement of truth. It flows, it doesn't freeze. When the mind releases its grip on control, life begins to flow naturally again. You no longer need everything to be certain to feel safe. You begin to trust the rhythm of impermanence, the beauty of the unknown. The less you cling, the more peace you find. And when you realize that fear was only the shadow of attachment, you finally walk freely, untouched, like the lotus, rooted in the stillness of your own being. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you're not sure what to say, just type, "My fear ends today." Bonus lesson: living beyond fear. What happens when you stop protecting yourself and start living? So much of our fear comes from trying to shield ourselves, from pain, from loss, from the unpredictable rhythm of life. But in that protection, we also shield ourselves from love, from freedom, from the vastness of being truly alive. The more we try to build walls around the heart, the smaller our world becomes. True living begins when the walls dissolve, when you no longer need to defend yourself against life itself. When there is no fear of death, life becomes infinite. This does not mean seeking danger or denying reality. It means meeting each breath as if it were complete. Every moment becomes whole when you stop demanding permanence from it. You see, the fear of death is not just about the body. It is the fear of change, of endings, of surrendering control. But once you make peace with impermanence, you touch something eternal, the unchanging awareness behind all change. The sun never hides from the night. It rises again, endlessly giving. It does not fear the darkness because it knows its nature. You too are that light. Fear tells you to withdraw, to wait for safety, to calculate every step. But life waits for no permission. It flows, and those who flow with it discover a quiet courage that cannot be taught. Each time you open your heart where it wants to close, life deepens its trust in you. Picture yourself standing before life. Open palms, steady heart, unafraid of the unknown. Feel the air touch your skin, the stillness in your chest, the pulse of being alive right now. In this very moment, nothing is missing. There is no future to fear, no past to regret, only this sacred breath, endlessly beginning again. How would you live if fear had no voice? What version of you is waiting on the other side of fear? What if this moment was already safe enough to begin? Let these questions dissolve slowly in your awareness. Let their silence speak. Because beyond fear lies not just courage, but life itself, the simple, luminous truth that you were never separate from peace, never apart from the flow. When fear ends, living begins. And the more you open to the uncertain beauty of existence, the more you realize you were never meant to be safe. You were meant to be free. Quick summary of the principles. Fear exists only in thought. Fear isn't born from reality, it's born from imagination. The moment you stop replaying mental scenarios, fear loses its power. Presence reveals that the only danger lies in believing your thoughts. When you anchor yourself in the now, fear dissolves effortlessly. The mirage of control. Control is fear pretending to be strength. We spend our lives trying to manage outcomes that were never ours to manage. Zen teaches that real safety doesn't come from control. It comes from surrendering to the flow of life with trust and awareness. Resistance is fear in disguise. Every inner struggle strengthens what you resist. When you stop fighting your emotions and instead observe them, fear weakens naturally. The energy used to suppress becomes the energy to see clearly, and clarity always brings peace. The fear of being seen. Most people don't fear failure, they fear exposure. The fear of judgment binds us to fake versions of ourselves. Freedom begins when you drop the mask, when authenticity becomes more important than approval. Impermanence is freedom. Fear clings to what must eventually change. Zen reminds us that impermanence is not tragedy, but truth. The more you embrace change, the more you discover that nothing can be lost, because everything is meant to move. Fear ends. Where awareness begins, fear cannot survive conscious observation. When you become the witness of fear instead of its victim, you realize it was never real. Awareness transforms anxiety into understanding, and that understanding becomes your liberation. The mind that trusts lives lightly. A trusting mind moves without burden. Fear tightens life. Trust expands it. The more you learn to flow with life's uncertainty, the lighter and more peaceful you become. Trust isn't naive. It's the highest intelligence. The fear of failure is the fear of beginning. We delay our lives waiting for fear to disappear, not realizing courage only grows through action. Zen reminds us every beginning carries uncertainty, and that's what makes it sacred. Move first. Clarity always follows. Fear of rejection is attachment to validation. The need for approval imprisons the spirit. When you no longer depend on others' validation to feel worthy, fear of rejection disappears. You stop chasing acceptance and start embodying authenticity. The silence that dissolves. Fear. Silence is the natural medicine for fear. In stillness, you meet yourself beyond noise, thoughts, and emotions. The quieter the mind becomes, the more fearless the heart feels. True peace doesn't speak, it simply is. The freedom of inner non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean indifference, it means inner independence. When you stop clinging to outcomes or emotions, fear loses its anchor. You move through life untouched, calm, and deeply alive. Living beyond fear. Living fully means living without the armor of fear. When you stop protecting yourself from life, you finally begin to experience it. Beyond fear lies not danger, but vast aliveness, the kind that makes every breath sacred. The more you run from fear, the more it follows you. But when you turn and face it with awareness, it melts into clarity. Zen teaches that life begins not when you have no fear, but when fear no longer dictates your choices. The truth is simple. Fear dies in the light of understanding. Every moment you embrace as it is, without resistance, without control, is a moment of real freedom. The fearless heart is not the one without fear. It is the one that walks despite it. So, let go of the illusion of control. Trust the movement of life. When you stop fearing loss, judgment, or uncertainty, you discover that peace was never missing. It was merely waiting for you to stop running. If this message spoke to you, remind yourself that freedom is not found outside. It's born within awareness. Like and share this video, share your opinion in the comment box, and subscribe to Deep Wisdom for more inspiring Buddhist insights on living a peaceful life.